Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Jodi-Ann, for that introduction. Thank you for putting together this space. This is magic, and so I'm glad to be here and reading with everyone. In the spirit of Black Women Write Seattle, I'm reading something brand new that I've never literally pulled off the printer earlier today. Never read in public before, but I workshopped it with some of the women who were in the space from Black Women Write Seattle. So it felt in the spirit of the events here to read from this new novel. The novel's called Kept, and it's about the crisis of unreported and underpublicized disappearances of Black women and girls. And so that's all I'm gonna say. You should get the rest of it. I'm gonna read the beginning of the prologue. Prologue, July 2022. We gathered the requisite supplies from the house: flashlight, coffee, stapler. Mom was already at the door, a garland of yellow flowers looped around her wrist, her arms folded around the new sheaf of flyers that we'd printed for tonight. This routine wasn't quite a science yet, though it should have been. We'd been doing it for 2 years, though each time we'd hoped it would be the last. But here we were again on the 3rd anniversary of Maya's disappearance, dutifully performing tonight's temperamental choreography. I glanced at the dappled moonlight on the kitchen surfaces to see if we'd forgotten anything. We have to go. Mom looked down at her wrist, even though there was no way she could see the time in the darkness. There was just a feeling that we both had, a ticking clock in the background that warned us we had to get out of here soon, that if we were late, the ritual would be void. By the time I got outside, Mom was already on the stairs. On these nights, a motor hummed to life inside her, and I had to quickly adjust to this uncharacteristic speed and buoyancy. We shared a shaky breath in the silent blue hatchback, a moment of stasis before the clock turned 8:10, the exact moment 3 years ago when Maya left to meet her best friend, Leslie. Ready? Mom asked. It was rhetorical, but I still nodded. A nod, never a verbal reply. It was part of the routine, and I knew my role. The thrumming engine catapulted us away from our 2-story apartment complex. Where should we look tonight? This was the only allowed deviation from the pattern, where to look for her. My neck swiveled like a pendulum from left to right. It was equally dark on both sides of the road. In my peripheral vision, I caught a glimpse of Mom. Normally, her face was blurry, like I was looking at her through dirty glass, but as she sat erect behind the steering wheel, there was no swipe of the hand that would turn her back into someone I recognized. On the 1st anniversary, this drive was a salve to manage the helplessness of waiting for people to call with leads or sightings. We needed a more active way to commemorate the anniversary of Maya's disappearance. Releasing balloons into the air felt too celebratory, and any candlelit vigil would have been sparsely attended. So it had to be something that would be just us. The original version of tonight was my idea. We retraced Maya's steps on the day she went missing, as though putting together pieces of a puzzle. I'd hoped that some clue would pop up that we could give the police that would help them find her, but we never learned anything new. When we arrived home after that 1st anniversary, I felt heavier than I had when we'd left. Like whatever Maya might have suffered that night broke off in me like shards of glass. I was about to tell Mom that we never had to do it again when I saw a sparkle in her eyes that I hadn't seen since Maya disappeared. She was energized, talking nonstop about how next year we should conduct a search and add a vigil at the end. Her incessant monologue didn't leave space for me to share my reservations, and happiness had been so fleeting those days, so what harm could it do? But it had caused harm. Mom pinned her hopes of finding Maya onto a day that was never intended to find her. She knows where we live, Mom. If she's close, she'll come back to us. But it had become this holy ritual that couldn't be altered, each year spinning more out of control. And if we didn't find Maya tonight, which I knew that we wouldn't, the depression that crept around the edges of our lives, always keeping a safe enough distance that she could drag herself out of, would finally pull her under. Mom. With a single syllable, I wanted to say everything that wouldn't make its way to my lips. That we wouldn't find Maya tonight, that doing this would only hurt more, that if she said the word, we could call it all off. Ramona? She said my name without guile, not picking up on my signals. It was bigger than me, a ship that would keep sailing with or without me. But if I went with her tonight, I could temper her expectations, could be the voice in her ear to assure her that whatever she thought was Maya wasn't. Let's turn right. The green blinker flickered in the dark car, silencing my unspoken protests. As I settled back in the seat for a long night, I donned the costume for tonight's compulsory game of pretend. Whatever efforts I put into the performance would uphold the tenuous peace that masqueraded as contentment in our house for another day. The speedometer's trembling red needle never rose above 20 as the car eased down the road. A few splashes of rain hit the windshield, but we kept moving forward, undeterred. Mom turned on the brights, bringing the dark world beyond us into focus. We crept along on the right side of the road, hazards on, as the rain intensified. Soon it came sideways onto the main roads, obscuring distances between objects and turning everything into a glimmer. Erratic wipers arced across the windshield as fat drops fell all around, a warning for us to end this fool's errand while we still could. Maybe we should do this tomorrow night when the weather's better. It was the closest I could get without outright saying that we needed to call it off. But even the implication would be seen as sacrilege because I was suggesting an alteration of the evening's events. 8:10 departure, 3-hour search, 11:10 arrival at the last place where she was seen on a security camera. That schedule left no room for deviation, even when the plan wasn't working. I could tell that she'd heard me from the way she choked up on the wheel, replacing her hands at 10 and 2 from where they'd slipped. Her focus was razor sharp on these nights, so narrowly limited to Maya that it left no room for me. Most days, she tolerated my presence with protracted silences. Other days, her barely concealed animosity tinged every rapid-fire question. What did she tell you? What do you know? What did you see? The car lurched to a sudden stop, and coffee splashed over the edges of the cup as a rebuke for my suggestion. There! Mom's words slapped in the silence like a flag unfurling as a shadow appeared on the road in an intermittent flash of lightning. I knew better than to get excited by anything we saw tonight, but her words still jolted me. Over there? I pointed to the right to mollify her, knowing that tonight would go by faster if I played along. Through the side window, contours became shoulders, and amorphous shapes became legs. A flash of red could have been the East Winslow High varsity cheerleading jacket that Maya wore the night she disappeared, the same one whose long sleeves dwarfed my skinny arms when she first brought it home. But it could have been anything else too, and it probably was. I'd studied Maya's senior picture in the living room the way I always did before we went out. My finger traced the high, angular eyebrows that she tweezed into adverted V's with her face inches from the mirror. From my stoop on the toilet lid beside her, I puckered chapped lips to kiss the air while desperately wishing that my chubby cheeks would melt away. Your time will come, Maya said, reading my thoughts. Then she caressed each cheek with the blush brush, knighting me. Don't grow up so fast. It's not her. Let's keep going. Just check. For me, please? It was easy for her to ask because she always stayed in the car while I approached strangers. Just once, she needed to be the one to go out because then she'd be less likely to assume that everyone we passed could have been Maya. Even as I wanted to protest, I opened the car door. The night would be smoother if I was compliant. It would be quick, and I'd be back in the car telling Mom that it wasn't her, and we'd be moving on to the next thing that she thought was Maya, and then we'd be back home. My eyes clung to the figure walking away, prolonging the moment before I had to get out. It's not her, Mom. Hurry, she's getting away. It was hard to know if she really believed it was Maya, if her delusions made it so that she didn't know what was true anymore. Hazard lights flitted in the dark car, marking time like an arrhythmic metronome while I waited for her to come to her senses. Go. Rain came down in sheets outside, and I stepped into the deluge. With each step away from the car's claustrophobia and toward this figure that was moving faster, there was more space to think. I couldn't do it, not tonight. But a backwards glimpse at Mom's ashen face under the dome light told me I had no choice. As I crept closer to the woman's fast pace, the gait was all off. The jacket was some generic red rain slicker that Maya never owned. How had she even thought this was Maya? Grief rewired my brain in the early days too, when I thought that everything, a bag catching wind and blowing down the street, a glimpse of red fabric in the distance, was Maya. In the years since, it had hardened into a pebble of ache, its sharp edges pricking me when a whiff of her fruity lotion turned my heartbeat staccato in my chest, or when a whisper on my wrist felt like her touch. Mom's grief was supposed to evolve too, but tonight was a reminder that it hadn't. "Excuse me," I called out. As the person turned around, I saw her piercing blue eyes and jutting jawline in slow motion. No resemblance to Maya. I could have said I was sorry and gone back to the car, but I had to make it believable. "What?" Her annoyance was palpable in the dark. "Do you know what time it is?" It was a stupid question, but it did the trick. Her phone lit up and she uttered the time in a clipped tone before tightening her jacket and jogging away from me. Far behind me, the car idled in a puddle of brightness from a streetlight. Back inside, Mom's upturned chin and wide-set eyes showed a fragile scrim of hope that vanished as I shook my head. She'd become gaunt over the last few years. My whole childhood, she'd been pillowy everywhere. But she'd lost so much weight since Maya's disappearance that sometimes I started upon seeing her. She used to be beautiful, too. It was something that Maya and I always envied and hoped we would inherit. I had no idea what I would inherit now. The car was littered with things to look at rather than Mom. A crocheted star that Maya had made in an elementary school art project dangled from the rearview mirror. A pile of soggy leaflets with Maya's name on them littered the floor. Post-its with the phone numbers and addresses of sightings throughout the years speckled the dashboard. And then there were the things I couldn't see but knew were there, like the glass bottle of amber liquid that Mom kept hidden in the glove compartment beneath the pile of unpaid parking tickets. A museum of grief. It looked like her. Mom broke the silence. I didn't have the heart to disagree with her now, not when she'd so clearly gotten her hopes up. "Maybe we'll have better luck next time," I played along with the charade. Maybe. An hour later, the car jerked back to life for the official ceremony. We trundled down familiar narrow streets before slowing at the intersection where a security camera had caught her last known movements that night. Even from above, she looked scared with her hands jammed deep in her jacket pockets and her mouth open like she was screaming. Before she slipped out of the camera shot, she looked over her right shoulder like someone was calling her name. We'd frozen the video on that image and stared at the still for years. There was always something new to see in the reduction of her life to one terrifying moment. Sometimes it was the watery quality of the gray light. Other times it was the awkward angle of her craned neck. In the absence of facts or real investigation, we used the slightest details to put together a narrative of what happened. But putting sound to the silence of the image didn't stop the questions. Where was she going? Who was following her? We parked in our usual spot at the corner, little changed in the last 3 years. Tito's grocery was still there, a rectangle of yellow light from the front window reflected against the damp pavement as rain fell from the striped awning above. We'd spent hours there canvassing customers and reviewing camera footage. The rain slackened and we stepped out, a garland of yellow daisies in hand. On the utility pole, rusty angled staples still grasped chewed corners of old posters that we'd attached over the years. I brought a new one from the stack in the car, more out of adherence to ritual than anything else. No one had called the tip line in months, but it was important to keep her face out there. "Ready?" Mom and I walked in lockstep to the utility pole and crouched to place the garland at its base. Upon finishing, I stapled a new poster in the footprint of the old ones, and we bowed our heads. With my eyes closed, senses were blunted at the edges. She was close, so close. Her melon-scented lotion, a laugh that tickled the air, a huff of breath on my neck that made the hair stand on end. I breathed her in, held her in my lungs for a moment longer than normal, and exhaled her. I held out my hands to grasp her, and they came back empty. "Wherever you are," I mouthed, "come back to us." Thank you.